Hello everyone and welcome to our presentation that will be done on Parkinson's disease. We will start with the history and progress through to the definitions as well as go through some risk factors and those affected in terms of Parkinson's disease, as well as end on the recommendations that we have suggested for Parkinson's disease, which will be relatively based around physical activity as well as exercise intervention strategies. So the basic history. In a short essay that was written in 1817 by Dr. James Parkinson, this was the first documented work on the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. This devastating disease was initially described as an involuntary tremulous motion, with decreased muscular power and an awkward typical gait that occurred without loss of senses or mental faculty. Dr. Jean-Martin Charcot added further description to the syndrome and named it Parkinson's disease. This was declared approximately 40 years later. Moving on to the definition as well. It is known as a neurodegenerative disease, but Parkinson's disease is caused by the death of cells in various parts of the brain, including the region called the substantia nigra. The substantia nigra cells produce dopamine, a chemical messenger responsible for transmitting signals within the brain that allow for coordination of movement. Therefore, individuals lose functions such as balance and gait. The loss of dopamine causes neurons to fire without the normal control, and approximately 60 to 80% of these cells have died before the motor symptoms even appear. Over the age of 60, usually, is when Parkinson's affects approximately 1 to 2% of individuals. Often there is a family history with studies suggesting that there is a genetic predisposition. However, other studies have shown that environmental factors also play a role. The continuum of whether the disease is caused by a genetic or environmental factor is different for all individuals. Examples of certain environmental factors causing the onset of Parkinson's include, but not limited to, head injuries and as well as exposure to certain pesticides. Progression of Parkinson's disease can vary from individual to individual and can be very difficult initially to diagnose. Initial presentations and the rate that symptoms differ can vary between each individual. Certain factors such as age and general health can influence the presentation of certain symptoms. Initial symptoms can include tremors, stiffness, balance disturbances as proposed earlier, as well as abnormality in gait. Differential diagnosis can include multiple system atrophy or progressive supranuclear palsy. Secondary causes of neuromuscular disturbances, toxins, brain lesions, and neurotoxins must be first ruled out beforehand. In terms of progression of the disease, effective treatments have not been defined that halt the progression of the disease or protect the neurons from further decline. Unfortunately, no cure for the disease has been known. At this standard point, there can only be improved quality of life. As the disease progresses, flexibility is required in medication as well as dosing and treatment regimens in order to respond to changes in symptoms and general functioning of specific individuals with the disease. Behavior and lifestyle, in terms of risk factors, the top risk factors seem to be without question. However, this can be agreed upon by all who research Parkinson's disease. The theory is still very vague, especially in which age grouping. There seems to be higher prevalence in men with this disease. This has led some researchers to examine estrogen as a possible protective factor, but still, however, this is unproven. Many professions have examined as risk factors for Parkinson's. Teachers, medical workers, forestry, logging, mining, oil field workers, as well as painters and construction workers. Again, none are conclusive factors. It has been proposed that increased risks seen in teachers and medical workers may be due to the high exposure to viral infections within their occupations. There is still substantial evidence that smoking and even caffeine or coffee are protective against developing Parkinson's disease, but the protective reason is still very vague and not understood. Smoking is still one of the most extensively studied lifestyle exposures related to this disease. Indicated mostly in the person, the individuals normally affected by the disease are considered to be older adults. As stated earlier, that the age grouping is very vague. The direct estimation of Parkinson's disease is considered to affect approximately 4 out of 1,000 individuals in the U.S. and approximately 6.3 million affected worldwide. Also stated that genetic and environmental predisposition of certain genes are involved in the susceptibility and occurrence of Parkinson's disease. Certain areas, geographical areas, depend upon, again, environmental as well as genetic factors, but it has been shown that the incident rate of Parkinson's disease is still roughly centered towards northern hemispheres rather than southern hemispheres. Environmental factors show to play a dominant role in the progression of Parkinson's disease. Exposures, as stated earlier, to certain pesticides, herbicides, and any heavy metals can trigger the onset or progressive feature of the disease. In the time period, as stated earlier, the age grouping is very vague, but symptoms of the disease can be seen as early as age 50. However, data collection shows the primary age that individuals develop Parkinson's disease is 65. Medical and occupational settings have advanced to a state of satisfaction, basically, where treatments are now available which can enable individuals with the disease obtain an overall improved quality of life. Severity of the disease can increase aggressively, especially in individuals who have had the disease for numerous years beforehand, as some symptoms and signs are invisible and individuals cannot pinpoint exactly what's going on yet. Parkinson's disease for the risk factors, there has been no direct conclusion in terms of what causes Parkinson's disease and what the exact risk factors of the disease are. Only estimations at this point. From the determinants of disease that can be found, they are not conclusive in associating a definite risk factor for Parkinson's. In terms of the environment, metals in rural environments, it was once believed that lead exposure, such as high magnesium exposure and iron, played a role in Parkinson's. However, this is no convincing evidence that exposure to these metals are causes for that specific disease. High prevalence of Parkinson's has been reported in rural agricultural regions in Canada. There have been many studies on rural living and pesticide exposure. However, no conclusive results determine this to be a certain risk factor. The use of well water has been examined as well in the past. Inconclusive results led this to potentially be a factor into the pesticide argument due to contamination of the water, therefore demonstrating that various other factors can be in play instead of going strictly into this causes a particular disease, such as Parkinson's disease. Genetically, however, there have been 11 genes associated with Parkinson's disease to date. While this discovery has given us an increase in knowledge of the disease, it is not conclusive as a risk factor. The 11 genes we know to be a risk factor of the disease only account for a small proportion of Parkinson's disease in the population. This still indicates that there are more genes yet to be identified. Running through the recommendations, as stated at the start of the presentation, given all of the research being to be very inconclusive, the disease seems to be directly found usually towards genetically and environmental factors. Genetically, the disease may be evident 100%, but certain precautions may be necessary to control the disease during the overall process. Direct research towards the disease dictates too much emphasis on rating scales and summarizations as usually utilized in many research articles. Continuing recommendations, however, the theory that should be developed at a greater view is exercise intervention, as well as physical activity in general. Similar parameters between exercise benefits and issues relating to Parkinson's disease. Many of the characteristics behind Parkinson's disease, such as decreased gait, memory loss, decreased functional ability, and atrophy of musculature, can possibly be treated by exercise interventions as well as possible daily physical activity. This is a certain research article that we have identified that showed much conclusive evidence that an exercise intervention strategy for certain individuals with Parkinson's disease may certainly be beneficial. Especially when this article was created in 2008, very recent, they identified that similar parameters as stated with those signs and symptoms between muscular atrophy as well as decreased gait and memory loss can be preventable with proper possible aerobic and resistance activities. In the article, the individuals examined directly the benefits of physical activity and exercise interventions and the direct symptoms of decreased gait, memory loss, functional ability, as well as atrophy and musculature as stated earlier. The article indicates that it may be possible to decrease each of those issues in individuals with Parkinson's. If an appropriate exercise program is administered and appropriately followed, depicting that it will vary for each individual, especially with certain comorbidities. Overall, however, the further quality research must be created to fully render a conclusion towards exercise intervention and the possible treatment options for Parkinson's disease. As stated, everything is very inconclusive at this point, but it seems that exercise intervention strategies as well as possible physical activity, daily physical activity, can increase quality of life for individuals with this possible disease. So to end it on a note, with a discussion question to make people become involved and kind of start thinking a little bit, which will be posted as well onto Blackboard under our discussion. There's a great deal of evidence suggesting that both genetics and the environment play a role in the development of Parkinson's disease. There has been increasing speculation about the use of pesticides in Parkinson's. Please describe an environmental factor that can cause development of this disease. And like I said, this will be posted, this discussion question, as well as the PowerPoint. Thank you everyone for listening. Furthermore, these are the references we have utilized. Please feel free.